Hello and welcome to the Tell Not Show. My co-host Julia J.K. Allen, author, editor, and editor coach, can't join us tonight, but I am Kirsha Fox, author of Son of Deception and The White Leaf Child, and my homeschooling mom to four, avid reader, and gamer. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight's exciting guest is W.D. Kilpack with some pretty impressive credentials. W.D. Kilpack III, MPC PMSC, is an award-winning and critically acclaimed internationally published writer with works appearing in print, radio, and television, starting with his first publication at the age of 9. As an adult, his 3 novels have earned 17 awards. He has been the editor or publisher of 19 news and literary publications, both online and print. He's received both his bachelor's and master's degrees from Westminster College of Salt Lake City, majoring in communication and philosophy, while completing the honors program. As a graduate student, he has earned a master's of professional communication with writing emphasis. He is also a high-performing athlete, qualifying for international competitions in Greco-Roman wrestling. He's a communication professor and a nationally recognized wrestling coach. He's an accomplished cook and has cooked nearly every type of food you can on a grill. He's happily married to his high school sweetheart and the father of 5 children, as well as helping to raise 5 stepchildren. He currently resides in Salt Lake City, Utah. So let's get started. Can you tell me about your writing journey? When did you start writing and why?
Well, I've always been a storyteller, and even before I could write, I was telling stories, and so I would draw them. And so I would draw pictures, and I would draw, the Battlestar Galactica and the Star Trek Enterprise and all that, and they would have battles, and I would draw the laser beams and the explosions and erase parts of the ship that were being destroyed and that sort of thing. And so that was, before I could write, I was doing that. And so that led to my first dream was to be a cartoonist. I wanted to open my own line of comic books. And so that was my first dream, starting when I was about 6. And then that was what I wanted to do till I was 12, when I had a teacher who taught 3 of my classes, my gifted and talented, my language arts, and my reading class. And she told me that for every writing assignment, rather than doing the actual assignment, she told me to write a chapter in a book. And so by the end of the year, I wrote my first fantasy novel. And so with that changed everything. That was where I went, this is what I want to do. And that was just one of those life-changing things. And I'm not sure what she saw, that made her do that, but I'm very grateful. And that was just one of those things. That changed one of a dream that I'd had that at that point was half my life.
Oh yeah. What an astute teacher to see that in you and to encourage you to bring that out. Yeah. You probably thought you were getting a pretty good deal, not having to do the other assignments.
Well, yeah. And, I did enjoy doing it. And, and then I did figure out that I wanted to, if I was going to do that, I'd need to be able to be writing all the time. And how do I do that? And I ended up being hired to write for the first time when I was 15. And that was for a sports publication here in Utah. And then there were some issues that I wasn't able to do a lot of the stuff that they were asking me to do. And I finally had to admit that I didn't have a driver's license. And that was embarrassing. But then they liked my writing, and so they didn't fire me, which was great.
Oh, yeah.
They just said, well, I was hired as an editor. And they said, well, if you can't go to these things, then then because you can't get there, then you can't have the editor's position. But I still got to stay on and do some writing. And so that was very tolerant of them. And they never asked my age. I didn't lie. But I was one of those kids that at 15, I had a mustache. So I looked a lot older. But so that, I've always been a writer. And
that's what you've been doing the whole time.
Yep.
Yeah, I was looking over your bio and there's so much here. I wasn't able to even mention most of it. But an editor and a publisher at 19 different news and literary publications. Just a partner at Safe Harbor Films. You're a busy guy.
Yeah, yeah, that sometimes is a little overwhelming. That
Hmm.
right now there's a book that I'm trying to get out called Battle Calm. It's a science fiction novel, and it was supposed to be out last month, and it's not out. And part of that is
Yeah.
just I'm being pulled in 1,000 different directions, and so
Hmm.
it just life is life is beating me a little bit right
Oh yeah, I
last little
totally
bit.
laugh in sympathy because I'm going through the same thing where I had goals for when I was going to publish this third book of mine, and it's kind of long past that. And I was like, okay, I need to have more realistic goals for the time I'm able to devote to writing.
Yep,
But I feel like every writer sympathizes with that. We're never as fast as we'd like to be. We're never as good as we want those first drafts to look like. But we get there and we keep going, right?
oh yeah, yeah. In this case, it's just that when I'm going through and the last draft, and there's just these moments where I come up to something and there's a moment. There's some of them are like, "What was I thinking?" And then there's others where it's like, "Wait a minute, that comes up now. That would be way better if it's over here earlier."
Hmm.
And then of course it ripples, so you
Yes.
can't just move it. It has to,
All
you
those
know,
little cascading effects.
yep. So
I know that really well. So what genres do you write and why? Sounds like you like a lot of sci-fi from as early as your age, 4 years old.
yeah, sci-fi and fantasy is what I write, and uh, just for whatever reason, that sci-fi and fantasy, they just speak to me. And part of it is that with both of those genres, they use distortion and exaggeration to make a point.
Yes.
And so that just really I get that. And so having that little bit of distortion to make things a little more clear, to be able to illustrate a point is uh, it's something that works for me the way that my mind works. So I enjoy reading it. I enjoy watching it. I was raised with watching Star Trek reruns, and uh, just a couple of years ago, I got to meet William Shatner, and that was awesome. It was very brief, but I got to meet him and told him that how he inspired me and affected my life, and he actually seemed genuinely moved. And I mean, he has to hear that a million times a day, but he seemed genuinely moved, and
Hmm.
but but those things just really spoke to me. And so, you know, I can remember things like seeing Beastmaster when I was in elementary school, and seeing Krull, and just a lot of these things that I couldn't get enough of it.
Hmm.
And in third grade, I started reading mythology at my elementary school, and Greek mythology, and then I found Norse mythology, and I read every mythology book that was in the library at my elementary school, and that again led uh, into fantasy novels. And I read The Hobbit when I was 10,
Hmm.
and that, of course, when I discovered Tolkien, then that was just,
Yes. That can become a whole new phase of your life of just deep diving into this whole universe he's created. Yeah.
yeah, that phase of my life is still, that is, you know, that is my life basically.
Hmm. Yeah, I believe like William Shatner, he's an artist, he's a performer. I think that he's a lot like us, where, again, 1,000 people could say, I loved your books, but like you're never going to not be touched when someone tells you that your books helped them somehow, or it touched them, or they cried, or they loved it.
Mhm.
Like I think that we kind of feed and draw inspiration from that to keep going, that what we're doing matters.
Well,
So,
I met an author who inspired me. His name is S.M. Sterling,
mhm.
and I met him at a con, and I didn't know that. it was possible for me to geek out, but I did. I didn't geek out with Shatner, but I did with S.M. Sterling. And he was very patient. He just sat back and waited. I could like complete a sentence. And I taught college for 25 years. I can talk.
Mhm.
I taught public speaking. I can talk. And so it was just really embarrassing. But he just waited and then told me he did the exact same thing with uh, one of his author heroes.
Mhm.
And I told him about how one of the things that with his writing, is that he did a lot of things before anybody else in terms of kind of pushing some boundaries in terms of some social some social issues and
Mhm.
putting them in novels. I just hadn't seen it before. And a lot of stuff that he had in his books, when I read it, I was like, I was a teenager, and I was like, you can do that?
Mhm.
And so I was telling him this story, and he just sat back, and it was just kind of funny. It's like he was almost in awe of what I was telling him. And then I said that it made me realize that at some point, that if you're not pushing the envelope, then you're probably not being original.
Mm.
And then he just sat and stared at me with his mouth open, and then he kind of flinched and said, I never thought about it like that, but you're probably right. And then he asked me why I was there, and I showed him a bookmark with, at that time I had 2 books out, and he just went, and then he pulled out his laptop, and he takes it and he pulls it up and hits enter and says, "Done." And that was just super
Oh,
cool.
wow. Yeah.
And so I hope that I haven't seen him since. I hope that he enjoyed my books, and I'd hope to get an endorsement if you're out there. And but he just is one of those that had just a big impact. A lot of there, he's not as big a name as some, but he just had a big influence on me
Mhm.
with his writing.
Yeah. That's a really good story. Thank you for sharing. So, can you tell me a little bit about your writing process? How do you go from like idea or prompt to like finished draft?
Well, I'll get an idea. Usually, I get them from different places. Sometimes it will be a recurring dream.
Mhm.
So the New Blood Saga, which is 4 of the 5 books that I've got out, it's 4 of the 8 in the series are published. That was a recurring dream.
Okay.
And it was a dream that I had, that this particular scene would be, I would have it sometimes every day for a week straight, but I had it for months. And every time I had the dream, I would wake up in tears, and it was just really getting to me. And so I realized at some point, well, obviously I have to write this. And so in order to get the same sort of emotional gravitas that it was doing to me, when I started writing, I pretty quickly realized I can't do that in one book.
Mhm.
So then I thought, well, okay, I'll write a trilogy. And then I realized, well, I can't do it in 3 books. And so then I thought, okay, it'll be longer than that. And then I thought, uh, it'll be a 6-book series. And so then where that scene actually happens is at the end of book 4, Rilari, which came out this past February. And when I was in book 6, I read my books to my wife.
Mhm.
And so she calls them her bedtime stories. And she said something to the effect of, "It feels like you're rushing." And I said, "Well, this is book 6, and it's a 6-book series, and this is condensing a whole bunch of discussion." But she basically said, "Well, why does it have to be 6?" And I said, "Because I said it was 6." And she said, "Well, you know, I give you permission to make it more." So it's an 8-book series, and
Mhm.
now I'm wondering if maybe book 8 will be part 1 and part 2, because you just when
Yes.
it's flowing, I write,
Mhm.
and I will get the idea down, and in this case, it was. So I was just writing, and getting back to the process. And so I'll be reading to her at night, and when I am writing during the day, I will jump back about 10 pages or so. And one one thing with that is that it helps me get back into the right frame of mind for where I was at in the story, helps
Mhm.
me get into the right gear for that place in the story. And then also it helps me get another wave of edits in right there. And then I'll get writing and just go. And there are places where I know that that will take some research, but right now it's just flowing. So I got to go, got to write.
Mhm.
And so I knew that there were places that I'll develop that later, or I'll do some research here later. I knew that was happening.
Don't interrupt your flow. Keep going.
Yep, got to get it out. It's in here. I got to go. I got to get it out. I don't want to lose it. And so I wrote all 8 books pretty quickly in, I don't know, a year.
That's
May-
pretty quick.
yeah, maybe 2 years.
Hmm.
And but it just had to get that down, and just me and my laptop and taking my laptop to bed, and that was the process, is getting that down. So then a lot of stuff, I knew that there was stuff I developed later that I was going to have to weave back in earlier as I was going through.
Hmm.
And so in Relari, it was getting, so Crown Prince is this thick, book 1. Then Order of Light got a little thicker,
Hmm.
and then Demon Seed got to be a little bit of a fatty,
Yeah.
and then Relari was a serious fatty. And so I took 4 chapters and moved them into the next book,
Hmm.
because it was just, I didn't want it to be cost prohibitive for people to get the book. And so that's where I started thinking, well, maybe I'm going to pull a Tad Williams. Do you know who Tad Williams is?
I'm not familiar with him now.
He has written some fantasy that was pretty important to the genre.
Hmm.
And there's a series that he wrote that he promoted from day one. It's a trilogy. Well, when it came to book 3, he did a part 1 and part 2, and they were thicker than that. And probably he got in the same boat where there was just so much that that has to be said still. And so maybe book 8 will be a part 1 and part 2. I don't know. Maybe I'll pull a Tad Williams.
Once again, I'm like just grinning because, again, in the same boat. My first book was supposed to be just one book, a standalone book for this idea I had. And then again, like I was like, oh, this is too much. So I split it into 2, published the first book, and then the second book became too much. So I
Mm-hmm.
split it into 2 again. So the second book's out, and now I'm developing that third part into the third. And I'm wondering, like, I wonder if this is enough. Like, this is getting really long. I wonder if I'm going to have to split it again. But I'm like trying to like cram so much into this third book. It's but
That,
the writing process has a way of just opening so many doors that you didn't see, and you're
mm-hmm.
discovering new things, and it's all just the best.
Well,
um,
that's
luckily,
where I'm at with Battle Calm, is that it's going to become 2 books.
mm-hmm.
That I'm in that same exact boat right now.
Yeah. So yeah, but I thankfully most sci-fi fantasy readers they like big books,
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, most of the time I'm like, yes, I get this much book for my money, and not like because
Yep.
most books tend to be around the same, $15 to $20 range, sometimes up to 30, depending. But yeah, we just want to put so much into them.
Well, yeah, and they're it just really is. It's kind of your heart and soul and all that, and just all those endless nights where I'm up writing, sometimes until daylight.
Mm-hmm.
There are times where I would be I'd wake up, start writing, and then when it's time to go to bed at 2 in the morning, then or whatever, then I'll read to my wife. She goes to sleep. I continue writing, and sometimes that just keeps on going until
Yes.
it's light.
That like, it's like you're possessed. It needs to
Mm-hmm.
come out. You have to do this. Yes. Um, a lot that's actually usually a later question is, how do you find time for writing? And when people ask me that, I'm like, well, it usually comes out of sleep. Like that's
Yep.
sometimes what ends up on the chopping block to make this writing happen, to make these books come out. Because we're busy.
Yeah. And there was some stuff I was working on with Safe Harbor Films, writing some scripts, that there was a streak of a few weeks that I was doing about 2 hours sleep a night.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you can only do that for so long. And I was trying to get a bunch of scripts done, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
it took.
That's what it takes. What to you is the most important part of writing?
Starting.
Good answer.
And there's a story behind this, that I was on an airplane, going to the Pan. I was going to try out for the Pan Am team in wrestling, and so I was on an airplane heading to Chicago, and the In-Flight magazine had an interview with Louis L'Amour, and he's wrote most of the.
Nate, is it Sweet Valley High? Is he the writer of that?
Well, he wrote most of
Okay.
the Western section might be one shelf.
Yes, Westerns.
He would write like 90% of of what's on there, and so he it was an interview with him, and the first question was, it was about this long in the column, and it was, you've written this many books that have gotten this many awards, and this many books have turned into this many TV miniseries that got this many awards, this many movies got this many awards, blah blah blah. And it said, how did you do it? And his response was 2 words, and it was profound to me. It just really kind of shook me to the core. And his response was, I started. And that, and it just, to me, was profound. It was something that it affected me in my writing, in my school, in my work, and going to college. I double majored, and I went to school full time. When I was getting my undergrad, I worked a full time and 2 part-time jobs, and that's tough to do. And so what would I do? I'd get an idea for an assignment. I'd write a paragraph, and then the idea is nailed down. But usually if I wrote a paragraph, I'd write 2, or then 3, and then a page. And then usually I'd knock out a first draft. And that was especially important if it was an assignment that I did not want to do. I'd start, and then it just would happen. It's the most important thing. Start.
A lot of people say, oh, I wish I could write a book, or, oh, I've always had this idea for a book, or, oh, I'd love to do that, what you do. But you're right. You have to sit down and start it. It's not enough to just turn it over in your head. All right. So in terms of your books, do you think you're more like character or plot based, or maybe like a like balanced?
Well, the plot's important. The plot's important, but I think that character is very important to me. The characters are important. That they need to be believable. Even though I write fantasy and science fiction, which can be larger than life in some ways, that I describe my style as my style of fantasy as realistic fantasy. So even though it's fantasy, they have real lives. They have things that are you might even say that it's a normal concern, that it's things that regular people have, but it's in a fantastic setting. And I like that dichotomy. I like that contrast. And I do the same thing with my science fiction. And that having something that might seem mundane placed in something that is the opposite. And I like those contrasts. I like taking things that seem to contradict and making them work. And so that is one of the things that, you have to do that with with character development, with having character that there needs to be an explanation. Why does that work? How did that happen in the first place? Well, there's a story behind that. There's an explanation. There's a reason. And so characters are very important to me. And having that, uh, having a rich background behind these characters, that's very significant. Very that's a big deal. And so I I think that character probably is the driving force behind my writing.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's the characters and their motivations and their wants and desires and predicaments that drive that forward. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. What do you feel like is a pitfall for a lot of authors when they write? What is something that maybe they neglect in their writing that you would advise newer authors to watch out for?
Lack of character development.
There you go. Yes.
That reading reading something or watching something on television
Mhm.
where you have that moment where something happens on, so say you're watching a movie and you have two characters that don't get along and all of a sudden they're being buddies, and how did you get from there to there?
Yeah.
Something, so that probably there was something in there that did explain that, but it got cut and got edited out. In
Hmm.
that case, that was a bad decision by the director or something like that, or
Hmm.
maybe the studio, who knows? But or if it was the writer, then shame on the writer for not having that development, because
Yes.
that stuff like that doesn't usually happen. Now,
Hmm.
sometimes it does, but I used to work with a guy that we did not get along in any way. We did not like each other, but our skill sets complemented each other, and we kept getting assigned to work together on these committees. And at
Hmm.
one point, we just had a talk where we said, you know, we don't get along, but they're going to keep doing this because our skills just really mesh. So
Hmm.
if we can just agree to get along while we're on these committees, then we can just help each other get promotions and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
well,
You call it truce.
yeah, and it's like when we don't have to ever see each other outside of these walls. And
Hmm.
so that's what we did, and we both got promotions and things like that and did well. And so if we included that discussion in the story, then it would make sense. But
Hmm.
if you just jumped from us hating each other to working together extremely well, then you're left as a reader or as a viewer going, huh? How
Yeah.
did that happen? How did you get from A to B? That makes no sense whatsoever.
There's nothing like a weird jump in the story to make you like, what? And like it pulls you out and it like, you know, it's
Hmm.
very jarring. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Don't jar the reader. Let's see. So, what is your favorite part of writing?
Creation.
Mhm.
I love world building. I love building the backgrounds of characters. I love developing technology. I love building belief systems. I love building cultures. I love doing research into cultures that I can use as a foundation.
Mhm.
You know, in the New Blood saga, if you know a bit about Celtic culture, you might be able to recognize that it's a deep down foundation.
Mhm.
I haven't. No, I've had one person say, "Is that based real deep down on Celtic culture?" I have had one person say that, but then when otherwise, if I mention it, then people go, "Oh yeah." But there is, a foundation there. But I love creating different pantheons and so different, that sort of thing. So with that book that I wrote when I was 12, I went through and I developed their religion, the family trees of the gods, the family trees of all these
Mhm.
royal houses, all that, like Tolkien did.
Mhm.
And I even was writing the language like Tolkien did. And that's the model that I have used for my fantasy, is that level of development and complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the one thing that I think that Tolkien doesn't have as much is that having medieval politics, and that, and so there are others that do that better than Tolkien did, but that's some of the stuff that I just love to do, and I think that he did extremely well, and that I have really worked hard to try to emulate,
Mm-hmm.
to the hope that I can not suffer in comparison, because the comparison is made.
Yeah. It's no easy feat to look at these very accomplished writers and try to even hold a candle to their work. But it's the most amazing thing when you look at your own stuff and go, you know what, this is pretty good. Like, I did a good job with this.
Yeah, I love that moment.
Uh-huh. Um, sorry, that was just like a really beautiful answer. I'm just like, oh wow, I gotta okay. Think that over for a bit. Do you ever deal with writer's block?
No, not
That
really. I It seems there's always something there that I can work with. I have a file in my drawer right here that if I get an idea, I'll write down something. And it might
mhm,
be a page, I might write a short story, I'll write down some enough that I can nail down the idea so that I can come back to it later. And I
mhm,
have a file that's, this thick, that's all these things that I've done since I was 12 years old, where I have done that to nail down the idea. But it
mhm,
might be, dreams that I've had. It might be, I saw something in a movie. That it might be just this opening scene that has a 10-second spot. That 10 seconds might inspire me to write a book.
mhm,
It might be a line from a song, where one line from a song might inspire me to
mhm,
write a book. And there's things like that that do happen. There might be, just one little thing might trigger something, and all of a sudden and it gets me going. And there are times, my wife and I go to a lot of movies, and there are times where um, we'll be walking out to the car after the movie, and I'm just not talking. I'm in this other place, and she'll just say, "We need to go home so you can write, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah," and
It's
I got to
wonderful
get
that
this
you have
done.
a supportive spouse, someone who you can throw your ideas off of and who can give you valuable feedback. And she recognizes that part of you and is like, yeah, let's get you home. Let's get you writing. Like,
She is amazing that way, and that's one thing that, when we were talking about my process, is that she does give me feedback, and she will tell me, especially with female characters, she'll tell me that, uh, well, okay, with any character, she might say, "I don't think that character would say that,"
mhm,
or she'll say that, "I don't think that character would say it in that way." But she says that more often than not when it's a female character, and so I think that that is really beneficial,
mhm,
because first of all, I think that it is. I think it's just arrogant for any writer to write a character that is not their own gender without having feedback like that.
mhm,
To presume, because men and women are different,
mhm,
and this, I taught communication for 25 years, and I spend the whole term in one of my classes illustrating those differences.
mhm,
Even the way our brains develop, and the way that we're raised, and our chemical makeup, and hormones, is all these things. All these things are very, very different.
mhm,
And so I just think that, with if writers are doing that and not getting, either way, and not getting feedback of some kind to help. I think that one, I think it's arrogant. Two, I think that it is a formula for failure. It's
Mhm.
opening you up for criticism, and I
I
think
can't
that
tell
that
you how many times I've been watching a show or a movie or reading a book, and you're just like, a man wrote this and he had no idea. like, like there's no way a woman would do this in this situation. Like they just wouldn't. Like that's a dangerous situation she's deliberately putting herself in. Like that.
yep.
Anyway, but a lot of
My
times
wife
you're
and
like,
I do that too.
no,
We'll sit there and say, "This was written by a man," or
yeah,
"This was written for a male audience," or
yes,
we'll discuss that. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm. And I mean, sometimes it's kind of a fun thing to play with to break expectations or gender norms, or like you can have a lot of fun with it. But when it's not done on purpose, when it's done in an error because you think that that's the way the other person, the other gender would behave, you know, it gets it gets a little tricky. And you can't always write what you know. Obviously, you don't know what it's like to write a dragon. You don't know what
Hmm.
it's like to necessarily right out into battle. You can't know that, but you can have similar enough experiences. You've experienced exhilaration, you've experienced things that you can kind of pull on. But if there is an analogous experience, that's something worth researching in any
Hmm.
way possible, for sure. Yeah.
And the flip side of that is that there are some times where we'll sit there and I'll say, "I've never seen or heard a guy say anything like that in my life,"
Hmm.
and this character is not that enlightened.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the opposite side of that same coin.
Absolutely. I definitely worry that I've run afoul of that myself. I wrote two very nice male main characters, and my most common criticism is they're too nice. But some people like that. For some people, they're like, "Yep, fantasy has enough jerks. Go ahead and write some nice characters." All right. You have quite a lot of awards, but what would you consider to be your most significant writing victory so far?
That's a really hard question.
Mm-hmm.
And the awards and stuff, that's cool. That is cool. Having and the way I look at that is it's like somebody gets it. That's how I look at it. That somebody, this judge or judges, they got it. And that is the feeling I get, and that's how I view that. And having having people who read my stuff and they talk to me about it, or they send me messages, they send me pictures. I've readers who send me pictures of themselves holding my books, and that it just started happening. And of course I encourage it now. I love it,
Mm-hmm.
and but it just started happening. And I think that those types of things, that when people sign up for my newsletter, I send them the vows of the Knights of Rill, and people started recording themselves reciting them and sending them to me. I did not intend that. Well, now when I send them, I encourage them to do that, but I did not do that up front. They just started doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And people wanting to participate, and that they are I can't think of a better way to illustrate that they get it, that it has touched them, that they want to do that. And one of the things I love to do is get an emotional response. There are things that I will write, particularly, with bad guys. I like bad guys that you love to hate. And having so that's one type of emotional response, but then having people doing those things, I think those are probably the biggest wins. I had a reader who uh, messaged me on Facebook. She just finished Rilari and immediately messaged me on Facebook saying, "When's the next book?" And it's like, well, it's going to be, a year. And she's telling me when her birthday is, and wouldn't it be great if I put it out then? And it's like, well, yeah, it would, but not going to happen. But, I didn't say that, but that it was just those things I think are the biggest win. That having people get it, having people do those things, that is, oh wow, I'm getting choked up. Those are the things I think are the biggest win.
Yeah. Yes, there are some books that you read and you enjoy them. They're fine, they're good. But there are some books you read that touch you. They make you cry. You remember certain parts of them like you were there, like you were in the room and watching it happen. It was so vivid and real to you. There's things that like you see yourself in that situation and it heals something within you. Those are great, wonderful books that you treasure. You put them on your shelf and you look at them and you smile because that book is your friend, like you have a relationship. You like the author because they're someone who spoke to your soul. And I think that to be that author that speaks to other people's soul is the best thing that you can hope to
That's
achieve.
one of my goals. I want you to be able to see it, to hear it, to smell it, to taste it, all of those things. I want my books to be immersive. I want you to feel like you're in it. And those are the types of comments that I get, that's how people feel. And the people who get it. And so having characters that, there's stuff that when I'm writing that I've cried when I'm writing it. And I've had stuff that I've laughed. There's stuff that I've read it and edited it and all this and things that I get to it. And I just still bust out laughing when I'm hitting it again, and so, having those moments, yeah.
You have a good perspective on this, being a professional writer and having it be such a big part of your life. Is there really any common writing advice that you just do not like? You hear it and you cringe because you're like, no, that's not how that works. Or,
Yes. The single worst thing is, and I do take this kind of personally, is I've had people tell me, I have had people tell me that because I don't outline my books, that I am not a writer. And
yes,
I'm not a real writer, is what I've been told. And not many, but I have had people do that. And those are fighting words, and so, but I don't outline my books. I do know where it's going. I have milestones in my head, but I don't outline it. I don't want to limit myself. And what I do is that if I'm writing and I have a moment where I sit back and I go, whoa, I didn't see that coming, then the reader's going to have that same moment.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't outline it. And I have outlined, I tried to co-write a novel with somebody. And so we really outlined it very strictly because of that, to try and make sure that, because we were going to be writing different sections and try to make sure.
Both on the same page, you know what direction it's supposed to go into, the goal that you're trying to achieve. Yeah.
Yep. And that structure was just stifling to me. It was crushing to me. And it was very hard for me to stay motivated and very hard for me to do it. And then I had a computer crash, and I am usually pretty good about backing things up, but I got lazy and didn't, and I lost about 75 pages that I'd written. And it, that was so devastating because it was so hard to write those 75 pages that I just couldn't pick it up again.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, then the guy I was working with, he got it, because he had written a lot less than I had. And he was just like, this isn't working, is it? And I was just like, thank you. And, so we haven't gone back to it, and I certainly haven't gone back to it. But part of it is that structure was just so rigid that I think that it just wasn't, I couldn't work with it. It was too stiff.
Yes, being a pantser or a discovery writer is a completely legitimate way to write wonderful books and novels and anything else you're writing. Yeah. There's our tagline for the show is there's more than one way up a mountain. Like there isn't one way to write a book. There's not one way to write a thing at all. There's as many different voices as there are authors.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Is there a book that you're reading right now?
Yes, I am reading a book called Artificial Intelligence, and it is by, oh crap. I have to check because I mix up his real name and his pen name.
Mm.
And so I don't want to mix that up. But it is a nonfiction book, and I'm actually, hold on. I didn't know what to expect with reading a nonfiction book about artificial intelligence, but I am really enjoying it. And I'm pulling it up on my Kindle here.
Aren't those the best? You go in with sort of like low, iffy expectations, and they just like are so good. Like,
and whoops, yeah, it's tootling at me. Okay. And I am a Kindle noob.
sorry, I don't have a Kindle. I'm not a book hoarder. I like them in print.
I do too, but then it's because of doing ebooks that I got one.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be able to look at them because the simulator, when you upload it and look at this, it just wasn't doing it for me. And Will Davis is the author.
All right.
But it's a book about artificial intelligence, and it just came out, and so it's addressing all of this hoopla about artificial intelligence. And he has a lot of kind of pop culture references to illustrate the concepts, and it's all stuff that I love. And so if you don't get those pop culture references, maybe, I don't know, but it speaks to me. So I'm really enjoying it.
What should do, right, is speak to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, do you want to take a moment to show off your books and tell us a little bit about them, and where can people find you online?
Okay, sure. Well, the New Blood Saga has got 4 books out. There are going to be 8-ish. And Crown Prince is book, let's see. Oh, okay, it's doing it backwards. So that's Crown Prince, which is book 1. And Nathar is the main character. He's the guardian of Merrick. And he has sight. He can see the future. He can see into the past. And one of the things that he has to deal with is interpreting that and what can and can't be prevented. Because if you try to stop something from happening that can't be prevented, then often it makes it worse. And so, and then Order of Light is book 2, and Demon Seed is book 3. Is book 3, and then Rilari is book 4. And so, and one thing is that in my bio it says 17 book awards. Just last week I got the 18th.
Oh, nice.
And Rilari just got an award. and
Mhm.
so that's pretty cool. That's the first award it's gotten. And then Paleface is a sci-fi novella uh, that got
Mhm.
honorable mention in L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future, and that took me years to get that. And one is that there's a word limit, and so every time I entered it, I had to write for it because obviously I have issues with word limits. And uh, but this one is in development for a movie,
Oh, that's amazing.
so that's exciting.
Yeah.
And so basically, it is Hector Whitehorse is the main character, and he is a Navajo, and he lives on a reservation. But it's kind of, if you wanted to nutshell it, it is sort of X-Files on an Indian reservation.
That sounds really cool. I,
And
I, I grew up watching X-Files way younger than I should have been watching X-Files, so I remember them quite fondly.
I own all of them on DVD, and I love X-Files.
Hmm.
And I can remember the first episode where Mulder and Scully, when they got entombed in the cocoon by all the bugs, the prehistoric bugs, and I was in awe because the bad guys won, and I just thought, I'm watching this.
Hmm.
But so you can find information about my books and me if you care and all that at kilpack.net. That's KILPACK.net. That's my website. It's got all my stuff. It's got all the information about my books. It's got pictures that people have sent me. It's got videos that people have sent me. It's got reviews and schedules, and I've got a history of things that when reviews have happened, when awards have happened, um, when I'm going to be doing some panels at a convention coming up in February. It's got all kinds of stuff. I think it's fun. It's got maps and some history and some behind the scenes stuff. It's got the cover for Battle Calm that is coming, and it's coming. But so killpack.net is the hub for my
For everything.
dreams. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It was especially pleasant to meet you.
Well,
um,
I appreciate that. You had some tough questions in there that made me do a little digging.
mhm. Yeah, me and Julie had a lot of fun kind of narrowing these questions down a bit. We didn't want to do the same things that other shows are doing necessarily. It's more geared towards people who are newer to writing and publishing, and it's a way of like sharing the wisdom of their experience to these newer authors. And I mean, honestly, I consider myself a newer baby author just because I've only been at this for a little while. So but I want to create something meaningful. If I'm going to put something out on the internet with my face on it, it's going to be meaningful, right?
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
You want people to you want it to have an impact. You want people to have a moment, to have that aha moment,
Hmm.
whichever way it goes.
Well,
If it's
yeah.
a
Someone who's been told that you can only outline, and if you're not doing an outline, you're doing it wrong. If they hear someone else say it's perfectly fine to pants, you don't have to do that. Like it frees them, and they can be the writer they want to be.
Yep.
For
the
example.
person the person who told me that I'm not a real writer, it was just shortly after that I was talking to somebody else, and I told him that, and that person just got really upset. Said, "Who told you that?"
The
And
audacity. Like,
so it was good to have those two come one right on top of the other.
yeah, if anyone said that out loud to me, I'd probably be like, I've just lost all respect for you. Like all of it. It's gone. Like
That is what happened. Yeah.
yeah. Thanks for listening, and join us next time when we welcome our next guest on Friday. And remember, there's always more than one way up a mountain. To be on our show, find us on social media at The Tell Not Show or email us at thetellnotshow@gmail.com. Thanks.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.